Hello friends! Around 4,500 years ago, something amazing was built in Egypt. It is one of the wonders of the world that still surprises people today. That wonder is called the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built very tall, 147 meters high, and it stayed the tallest structure in the world for more than 4,000 years. By the way, now it's Burj Khalifa with 828 meters height. Okay, so the pyramid was made using very heavy stones. Altogether, the pyramid weighs around 6 million tons. Now think about this. The tallest building today is the Burj Khalifa, and it weighs only 500,000 tons. That's much less. This makes people wonder, how was this Great Pyramid built? Back then, people didn't have cranes, bulldozers, or machines. In fact, they didn't even have wheels. Still, they built a huge pyramid that is still standing today. Can you believe that this pyramid has survived for over 4,500 years? It stood through hot summers, big storms, heavy rains, and strong winds. No other ancient building this big has survived like it. But how did they do it? Come, let's try to understand this mystery of the pyramids in this video. The Great Pyramid is known as one of the most mysterious buildings on Earth. It was built around 2500 BC, and it stayed the tallest building on Earth for more than 3,500 years. The pyramids were made as giant tombs covered in shiny white limestone. These were not just graves. They were meant to keep secrets of the dead. The more we go back in history, the harder it becomes to know exactly what happened and how things were done. Experts believe the Great Pyramid of Giza was built in the year 2560 BC by the king Pharaoh Khufu. In ancient Egypt, the kings were called pharaohs. We don't know a lot about Pharaoh Khufu, but we do know that he was the second king of the fourth group of rulers in Egypt's Old Kingdom. How long he ruled is still argued by experts. Some say 23 years, others say 34 years, and some say over 60 years. It's a highly debated topic. The Great Pyramid is found on the west side of the Nile River. When you look at pictures of it, you'll see there are two more pyramids nearby. Out of the three, the tallest is Khufu's pyramid, also called the Great Pyramid of Giza. The second largest is the Pyramid of Khafre, which people believe was built by Khufu's son, Khafre. The smallest is the Pyramid of Menkaure, built by Khafre's son. These three pyramids are the only big ones left from that time. There's also the Great Sphinx, many tombs, and some smaller pyramids nearby. In total, there are 118 pyramids of different shapes and sizes in Egypt. Most have been damaged by time and weather. Only a few are still in good condition. The best preserved ones are the three big pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza. Why were these pyramids built? They were built as tombs. The pharaohs were buried inside them. The people of ancient Egypt believed in life after death. They thought that after someone died, their soul went to the underworld where it was judged by gods. If the person had lived a good life, they would live forever in the afterlife. So pharaohs made big tombs for themselves while they were still alive. They filled them with food, gold, jewels, clothes, and furniture. They thought these things would be useful in the afterlife. After a pharaoh died, his body was mummified and placed in a stone or wooden box called a sarcophagus. You may ask, how are we sure this is true? Well, there are two big reasons. First, many pyramids have writings and carvings that tell us about these beliefs. Second, almost all the old pyramids found in Egypt and Sudan have been used as tombs. But inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, no treasures were found, just an empty sarcophagus. People believe that robbers stole the treasure long ago, before archaeologists arrived. But not everyone agrees with this. Some people have come up with strange and wild ideas. One idea says that the Great Pyramid was a kind of power plant that made electricity. People who believe this say that ancient Egyptians were very smart and had found a way to use electric power. They point to pictures found in old temples that they say look like light bulbs. They say Egyptians invented electric light, but later it was lost. But experts say this isn't true. The pictures are actually part of a mythical story. Another strange theory says the pyramid was used to store food. In 1998, a man named Ben Carson, an American politician, said that Joseph from the Bible built the pyramids to store grain. He said, "My personal theory is that Joseph built the pyramids to store grain, but archaeologists believe the pyramids were made by pharaohs." Sometimes people share these kinds of ideas to fit their religious stories or political beliefs. But today, almost all historians agree that the Great Pyramid of Giza was a tomb. The bigger the tomb, and the more treasure it had, the better the pharaoh's afterlife was believed to be. Now, let's look at the biggest puzzle of all. How were these huge pyramids built? This part is still full of questions. How did they make a pyramid 147 meters high? How did they lift huge stones that weighed 2.5 to 80 tons each? How did they cut the stones so perfectly when they didn't have modern tools? And how did they move the stones when they didn't even have wheeled carts? All of this work was done in just 20 years. There are many ideas, but let's first clear up a big misunderstanding. Many people think that slaves built the pyramids. You may have seen this in movies, slaves being beaten and forced to work. This idea came from a Greek writer named Herodotus in the 5th century BC. But now we know this is not true. The workers were not slaves, they were skilled builders who were treated well and given good food. In fact, they were stronger and healthier than the average Egyptian at the time. They lived near the pyramids in special cities built for workers. And farmers helped too when they weren't busy in their fields. It was like a team project by the whole country. Around 20,000 to 30,000 people worked on the pyramid. They worked about 10 hours a day. To build the pyramid, they used 5.5 million tons of limestone, 8,000 tons of granite, 500,000 tons of mortar. Most of the materials came from nearby. Some granite came from southern Egypt, 800 kilometers away. How were the stones cut? At that time, they used tools made of copper. To break harder rocks like granite, they used dolerite stones. One smart method they used was this. They found cracks in the rocks, put in wooden sticks soaked in water, and as the wood got bigger, the rock broke apart. But how did they move the big stones? They didn't have carts with wheels, so they couldn't just roll the stones to the site. One idea is they used rafts to carry stones on the Nile River. After the stones reached the pyramid, they moved them using sledges pulled over wet sand. This idea comes from a painting found in an old tomb from around 1900 BC. In that picture, 170 people are shown pulling a statue on a sledge. And one person is pouring water on the sand. At first, people thought the water was for a ritual. But when scientists tested it in 2014, they found that wet sand makes it easier to pull heavy things. If you mix just the right amount of water, about 2% to 5%, the sand becomes stronger and less slippery. Then comes the next question. How did they lift the stones up high? They had no cranes or pulleys. Even wheels weren't used for this, but they had a clever idea: ramps. In 2015, scientists found a very old wooden ramp in a quarry. Experts believe they made sloping paths to pull the stones up. They used wooden posts and ropes on both sides of the slope to help pull the stones upward. One scientist, Joseph West, shared this idea in 2014. After each layer of the pyramid was built, they would build a new ramp to reach the next level. To make it easier, they made the ramps long and not too steep. Another idea is they used levers. This is how a lever works. Put a heavy rock on one end of a stick and push down the other side. It helps lift the rock easily. Egyptians already used this tool, called a shaduf, to lift water from the Nile River for farming. These ideas sound smart, but still, it's hard to believe they built it all in just 20 years. To finish in time, they would have to place a stone every 3 minutes, every day, for 20 years. That's very difficult. That's why this mystery is still not solved. We do know a few more things though. The bottom stones were placed without mortar, but the top layers had mortar added to make the pyramid stronger. This is one reason why the pyramid has survived many big earthquakes over the years. Even the mortar they used is still a mystery. Scientists know what it's made of, but they still can't make the same kind. The last step of building the pyramid was covering it with shiny white limestone on the outside. This made the pyramid shine brightly in the sunlight. Over time, most of this shiny layer was lost, but you can still see some on top of the Pyramid of Khafra. Now let's talk about the pyramid's design. It is truly amazing. The pyramid is built to point exactly to the north, east, south, and west. They didn't have compasses or GPS back then. So how did they do it? One theory is they used the autumn equinox. At that time of year, the shadow from the sun shows perfect east and west. Another idea is that they used stars to help guide the building. In 1989, a writer named Robert Bauval said that the pyramids were lined up with the Orion's belt stars. He thought this was done on purpose, and that ancient Egyptians knew about astronomy. Some people call this a fringe theory, which means it's not accepted by most experts. Why? Because the pyramids were not built at the same time, and when scientists tested this in 1999, they found the stars didn't match up exactly. Also, the stars have moved over thousands of years. Sometimes we try to find patterns, even when they're not real. When we don't know something for sure, people often make up their own theories. If someone takes it too far, they might even say aliens built the pyramids. But these ideas don't match science. It's better to say clearly what we know and what we don't know yet. That way, future scientists can keep learning and one day solve the mystery. Subscribe to It's Released for more knowledge. Thank you for watching.